explaining it, they don't get it, and they never will. Let the Joker tell you why.
Nobody understands your pain. You've tried explaining it. You've opened up. You've shared your story with people you thought would get it. And they nodded. They said the right words. They pretended to understand. But they didn't. They don't. They can't. Because understanding your pain would require them to acknowledge things they're not ready to face. It would require them to see the darkness that exists in this world, the cruelty, the injustice, the way people destroy each other and call it life. And they don't want to see that. They want to stay comfortable in their bubble, where bad things only happen to other people, where pain has a reason, where suffering has a purpose. So when you try to tell them about your pain, they minimize it. They compare it. They tell you about someone who has it worse. They say time heals all wounds. They say everything happens for a reason. They say you need to move on. And every word makes you feel more alone, because they're not trying to understand you. They're trying to make you less uncomfortable for them. They're trying to fix you so they don't have to sit with your pain. They're trying to rush you through healing so they can go back to pretending the world is safe. But you can't pretend anymore. You've seen too much. You've felt too much. You know too much. And that knowing is the loneliest place in the world, because you're surrounded by people who refuse to see what you can't unsee, who refuse to feel what you can't unfeel, who refuse to understand what you can't forget. And that makes you alien, different, other. But I understand. I understand because I've been there, because I am there, because anyone who's really lived has been there. And I'm going to tell you why they don't understand, why they can't, and what that means for you. Listen, why they can't understand. They don't understand your pain because they've never experienced pain like yours. Not because your pain is special, but because real pain, the kind that changes you, the kind that breaks you, the kind that rewrites who you are, that pain is rare. Most people experience discomfort, disappointment, sadness, but they don't experience the kind of pain that makes you question everything, that destroys your faith in people, that leaves you fundamentally altered. They've never been betrayed so deeply that they stop trusting their own judgment. They've never been hurt so badly that they started questioning their own worth. They've never had their reality shattered so completely that they had to rebuild themselves from nothing. So when you try to explain that kind of pain, they have no reference point, no framework, no way to truly comprehend it. It's like explaining color to someone who's been blind from birth. They can hear the words, but they can't see the picture. And instead of admitting that, instead of saying, I don't understand, but I'm here anyway, they pretend. They pretend they get it. They offer advice that doesn't apply. They give you solutions to problems you don't have. Because admitting they don't understand would mean admitting they can't help. And people hate feeling helpless. So they say the wrong things. They minimize your experience. They make it about them. And you walk away feeling more alone than before you shared. But here's what you need to understand. Their inability to comprehend your pain doesn't make your pain invalid. It just makes them inexperienced, sheltered, lucky. They haven't been where you've been. They haven't survived what you've survived. They haven't seen what you've seen. And while that's good for them, it means they're not qualified to judge your pain or tell you how to heal from it. Only someone who's been through the fire can understand what it's like to burn. Only someone who's rebuilt themselves from ashes can understand the process of resurrection. Everyone else is just guessing, and their guesses sound hollow because they are. Let's talk about the things they say, the platitudes, the empty phrases that cut deeper than silence ever could. Time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. Time just gives you distance. Some wounds never heal. Some pain never stops. You just learn to carry it better. Everything happens for a reason. That's what people say when they can't face the randomness of suffering. When they need to believe there's purpose in pain, because purposeless pain is too terrifying to acknowledge. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Tell that to the people who survived but never recovered, who are still here but not really living, who made it through but lost themselves in the process. At least you have your health. At least you have a roof over your head. At least you're not starving. As if pain is a competition. As if suffering can be measured and ranked. As if your wounds don't count because someone somewhere has it worse. You just need to think positive, right? Because positive thinking can undo trauma. Because smiling through the pain makes it disappear. Because pretending to be fine is the same as being fine. Have you tried yoga? Meditation? Journaling? As if your soul-deep pain can be fixed with a hobby. As if the things that broke you can be healed with breathing exercises and self-help books. These phrases aren't meant to help you. They're meant to make the person saying them feel better. They're meant to end the conversation, to move past your pain, to make it manageable for them. Because your real pain makes them uncomfortable. It reminds them that bad things happen to good people, that the world isn't fair, that they could be next. So they say the platitudes. They offer the quick fixes. They prescribe the easy solutions. And when you don't immediately get better, when you don't bounce back, when you don't heal on their timeline, they get frustrated with you. They say you're not trying hard enough. You're choosing to be miserable. You're stuck in victim mentality. Because accepting that some pain doesn't go away would mean accepting that they don't have the power to fix you. And people need to believe they can fix things. They need to believe that every problem has a solution. They need to believe that suffering can be controlled. But you know better. You know that some pain is permanent. Some damage is irreversible. Some wounds never fully close. And knowing that makes you different from them. It makes you honest in a world of people pretending. You know what the loneliest part is? It's not that they don't understand. It's that they stop trying to. At first, they ask how you're doing. They check in. They make an effort. But after a while, when you're not better, when you're still struggling, when you're still carrying the pain, they get tired. They stop asking. They stop reaching out. They stop pretending to care because your pain exhausted them. Your inability to heal on their schedule frustrated them. Your honesty about still struggling made them uncomfortable. So they move on. They go back to their lives. They tell themselves they tried, and you're left alone. Not just with your pain, but with the realization that people have limits on how long they'll care about your suffering. You learn that compassion has an expiration date, that support has a shelf life, that eventually everyone gets tired of hearing about it. So you stop talking about it. You stop sharing. You stop reaching out. Not because you're healed, but because you learned that your pain is too much for most people to handle. You learn to suffer in silence, to smile when you're dying inside, to say you're fine when you're falling apart, because that's easier for them. That's more comfortable. That's what they prefer. And you become an expert at hiding, at performing, at being whoever they need you to be so they don't have to deal with who you actually are. You become two people, the one they see and the one you are. And the distance between those two people grows every day, until you don't even recognize yourself anymore, until you forget what it feels like to be real with someone, until you can't remember the last time you told the truth about how you're doing. That's the loneliness. Not being alone, but being surrounded by people who can't see you. Having friends who don't know you. Having family who doesn't understand you. Having a life that feels like a performance. You're living, but you're not alive. You're speaking, but you're not heard. You're present, but you're invisible. And nobody notices. Nobody sees. Nobody cares enough to look deeper, because they're satisfied with the surface. They're content with the mask. They don't want to know what's underneath. Listen. Why I understand your pain, not because I know your story, but because I know the pattern. I know what it's like to carry weight nobody sees, to fight battles nobody knows about, to survive things nobody acknowledges. I know what it's like to explain your pain and watch people's eyes glaze over, to share your story and see them search for the exit, to open up and realize you just made them uncomfortable. I know what it's like to be told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. I know what it's like to wonder if you're crazy, if you're overreacting, if maybe they're right and you should just get over it. I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning while everyone else is breathing just fine, to be screaming on the inside while smiling on the outside. I know what it's like to lose faith in people, to stop believing in goodness, to see the world for what it really is, and not be able to unsee it. I know what it's like to be changed by pain, to be someone different on the other side, to realize you can never go back to who you were before. I know what it's like to feel fundamentally alone, to be in a room full of people and still feel like you're the only one who understands. That's why I understand. Not because we have the same story, but because we have the same scars. We've both been to places most people never go. We've both seen things most people never see. We've both survived things most people couldn't. And that creates a recognition, a knowing, an understanding that doesn't require explanation. You don't have to tell me how it feels. I already know. You don't have to justify your pain. I already believe you. You don't have to prove you're struggling. I already see it. That's the difference between me and them. They need you to explain. They need you to prove. They need you to make sense. But I don't, because I've been where you are. I am where you are. And I'm not here to fix you, or judge you, or tell you to get over it. I'm here to say I see you. I know you. I understand you. And you're not alone. The things they'll never get. There are things about your pain they'll never understand. They'll never understand why you can't just move on. Why you can't just forgive. Why you can't just let it go. They think forgiveness is something you do once. A decision you make, and then it's done. They don't understand that forgiveness is something you have to choose every single day. And some days you can't. Some days the anger is too fresh. Some days the wound reopens. They think moving on means forgetting. They think healing means going back to who you were. They don't understand that you can't go back. That the person you were before doesn't exist anymore. That moving forward means becoming someone new, not returning to something old. They'll never understand why certain things trigger you, why a song makes you cry, why a smell brings you back, why a phrase sends you spiraling. They don't understand trauma. They don't understand how pain gets stored in your body, how your nervous system remembers even when your mind tries to forget. They'll never understand why you need space, why you can't do certain things, why you have to protect your peace so carefully. They think boundaries are walls. They think self-protection is selfishness. They think saying no is being difficult. They don't understand that boundaries are survival, that self-protection is self-love, that saying no is saying yes to yourself. They'll never understand why you're different now, why you're quieter, why you're more guarded, why you're less trusting. They want the old you back, the fun you, the easy you, the you that made them comfortable. They don't understand that the old you died, that pain killed that version, that you can't resurrect someone who doesn't exist anymore. They'll never understand why some days are harder than others, why you can be fine for weeks and then suddenly you're not, why healing isn't linear. They think recovery is a straight line. They think you should just keep getting better. They don't understand the setbacks, the relapses, the bad days that come out of nowhere. They'll never understand any of this because they've never lived it. And you can't teach someone to understand something they haven't experienced. So stop trying. Stop explaining. Stop hoping they'll finally get it. They won't. And that's not your fault. Here's something they don't tell you about pain. Sometimes being understood is dangerous, because when you find someone who actually gets it, someone who's been there, someone who knows, you feel this overwhelming relief. Finally someone sees me. Finally someone understands. And you open up. You share everything. You let them in completely, because it feels so good to be seen, to be known, to not have to explain or justify or prove. But sometimes that person becomes your entire support system, your only outlet, your single source of understanding. And that's dangerous, because people leave, they change, they have their own pain to deal with. And when they go, when they can't be there anymore, when they need to focus on themselves, you're left more alone than before, because now you know what it's like to be understood. And going back to not being understood is harder the second time. So you have to be careful. You have to diversify your support. You have to build multiple connections, not rely on one. But here's the problem. Finding even one person who understands is rare. Finding multiple is nearly impossible. So most people who've been through real pain end up in one of two places. Either they stay alone because it's safer than risking connection, or they attach too hard to the one person who gets it and get destroyed when that person leaves. Neither option is good, but both are understandable. Because the alternative is what you've been doing. Pretending, performing, hiding your truth from everyone. And that's not sustainable either. So what do? How do you navigate this? You learn to be your own understanding. You learn to validate your own pain. You learn to hold yourself when nobody else can. You learn that external validation is nice but not necessary. That being understood by others is a bonus, not a requirement. You learn to say, I understand me. I know what I've been through. I know what I'm carrying. And that's enough. Because it has to be. Because you can't base your healing on whether other people get it or not. You have to heal for you. Validate for you. Understand for you. And if someone else comes along who gets it, great. That's beautiful. That's rare. But if they don't, if you never find that person, you're still okay. Because you have yourself. And sometimes that's all you need. Listen, why your pain makes them uncomfortable. Let's talk about why your pain makes people so uncomfortable. It's not because they don't care. Most people genuinely don't want to see others suffering. It's because your pain reminds them of their own vulnerability. When you talk about being betrayed, it reminds them that people they trust could betray them too. When you talk about loss, it reminds them that they could lose the things they love. When you talk about trauma, it reminds them that bad things don't just happen to other people. They could happen to them. And that's terrifying. That's existentially threatening. That shatters their sense of safety. So they minimize your pain, not because it's not real, but because accepting it as real means accepting that they're not safe either. They need to believe you did something wrong, that you could have prevented it, that there was a reason it happened to you and not them. Because if there's no reason, if it was random, if it could happen to anyone, then they're vulnerable too. And they can't handle that. So they blame you. They say you should have seen it coming. You should have left earlier. You should have known better. They analyze your choices. They point out your mistakes. They find ways to make it your fault. Not because they're cruel, but because they need to believe they're in control. That if they do everything right, they'll be safe. Your pain destroys that illusion. Your suffering proves that sometimes doing everything right still isn't enough. That's why they can't sit with your pain. That's why they rush to fix it. That's why they offer useless advice and empty platitudes. Because acknowledging the depth of your pain means acknowledging the randomness of suffering. And humans need meaning. We need control. We need to believe there's a reason. So they create reasons. They invent explanations. They construct narratives that make your pain make sense. And in doing so, they make you feel more alone, because you know the truth. You know there was no reason. You know you didn't deserve it. You know it could have happened to anyone. But they can't accept that. So they create stories, and those stories blame you, and you're left carrying not just your pain, but their need to make sense of it. You know what exhausting? Having to explain your pain to people who will never understand it. Having to justify why you're still struggling. Having to prove that you're trying to heal. Having to convince people that your pain is real. You become a performer, constantly auditioning for the role of someone worthy of compassion. You learn to downplay your pain so people don't think you're dramatic, but not so much that they think you're fine and stop caring. You learn to be vulnerable enough to connect, but not so vulnerable that you scare them away. You learn to time your breakdowns, to schedule your suffering, to only fall apart when it's convenient for others. And it's exhausting, because pain doesn't work on a schedule. Trauma doesn't care about timing. Triggers don't wait for appropriate moments. But you learn to suppress it, to hold it in, to wait until you're alone to fall apart, because you've learned that public pain makes people uncomfortable, that visible suffering makes you a burden, that asking for support makes you too much. So you suffer alone, and you smile in public. And the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be gets wider every day, until you don't even know which one is real anymore. Until the performance becomes permanent. Until you forget what it's like to just be yourself. That's what happens when you have to constantly explain your pain to people who don't get it. You stop explaining. You stop sharing. You stop being real. Because the cost of trying to be understood is higher than the benefit of actually being understood. So you choose silence. You choose solitude. You choose the safety of being unseen. And you tell yourself it's better this way. That you're protecting yourself. That you don't need anyone anyway. But deep down you know the truth. You're not choosing solitude. You're accepting isolation because connection became too painful. You're not protecting yourself. You're building walls because everyone you let in eventually left. You're not strong, you're surviving. And there's a difference. But you can't say that out loud, because that would be complaining, that would be wallowing. That would be not taking responsibility for your healing. So you keep it inside. You keep performing. You keep pretending. And the weight of it all just keeps getting heavier. What understanding actually looks like? Let me tell you what real understanding looks like. It's not someone saying, I know exactly how you feel, because they don't. They can't. Real understanding is someone saying, I don't know how you feel, but I believe you. It's not someone offering solutions. It's someone offering presence. Real understanding is someone sitting with you in the darkness without trying to turn on the lights. It's not someone saying it'll get better. It's someone saying it's okay if it doesn't get better today. Real understanding is someone who doesn't need you to be okay to be comfortable around you. It's not someone who checks on you once and then moves on. It's someone who checks on you consistently without expecting you to be healed. Real understanding is someone who doesn't take your bad days personally, who doesn't guilt you for struggling, who doesn't punish you for not being fun anymore. It's not someone who says you should be over it by now. It's someone who says take all the time you need. Real understanding is someone who validates your pain without comparing it to others, who acknowledges your struggle without minimizing it. It's not someone who says everything happens for a reason. It's someone who says this shouldn't have happened to you. Real understanding is someone who holds space for your anger without trying to calm you down, for your sadness without trying to cheer you up, for your pain without trying to fix it. It's someone who understands that healing isn't linear, that trauma is complex, that pain doesn't follow a timeline. Real understanding is rare, so rare that most people go their entire lives without experiencing it. But when you find it, when you meet someone who truly gets it, it changes everything. Not because they fix you, but because they see you. And being seen when you've been invisible for so long feels like resurrection. That's what you're looking for. Not someone to take away the pain, but someone who can witness it without running. And if you haven't found that yet, don't give up. Those people exist. They're just as rare and wounded and careful as you are. But they're out there, looking for the same thing you are. Someone who understands. Here's something nobody tells you about pain. It gives you a gift. A terrible, brutal, necessary gift. The ability to understand other people's pain. Because you've been there. Because you know what it's like. Because you've survived the unsurvivable. You can spot someone who's struggling from a mile away. You can see through the masks. You can hear the lies people tell when they say they're fine. You become fluent in a language most people don't speak. The language of pain, of trauma, of survival. And that makes you dangerous in the best way. Because you can do for others what nobody did for you. You can see them, really see them. Not the performance, not the mask, but the person underneath. You can sit with their pain without trying to fix it. You can validate their struggle without minimizing it. You can hold space for their darkness without trying to force light. You can be the person you needed when you were going through it. That's the gift. Not that you suffered, but that your suffering gave you the capacity to truly understand someone else's suffering. Most people can sympathize. They can feel sorry for someone. They can offer empty platitudes and surface-level support. But you can empathize. You can feel with someone. You can offer real understanding and deep connection. That's rare. That's valuable. That's powerful. And it comes from the worst parts of your life, from the things you wish never happened, from the pain you'd erase if you could. But you can't erase it, so you might as well use it. You might as well take the worst thing that ever happened to you and turn it into the best thing you can offer someone else. Your understanding, your presence, your witness. That's what transforms pain from meaningless suffering into purposeful experience. Not because there was a reason you had to go through it, but because you can create meaning from it anyway. You can choose to let your pain make you more human, more compassionate, more real. Or you can let it make you cold, bitter, closed. Both are understandable. Both are valid responses to trauma. But one leaves you alone, and one connects you to every other person who survived the unsurvivable. Choose wisely. The final truth: they don't understand your pain, and they probably never will. That's not a judgment on them. It's just reality. Most people haven't been where you've been. They haven't survived what you've survived. They haven't carried what you've carried, so they can't understand. And you can't make them. But here's what you can do. You can stop needing them to understand. You can stop trying to explain. You can stop hoping they'll finally get it. You can accept that being misunderstood is part of having been through something real. That invisibility is the price of survival. And you can find peace in that. Not because it's fair, but because it's true. You can find other people who do understand. The rare ones, the wounded ones, the ones who've been there too. And you can build connections based on that shared understanding, that mutual recognition, that unspoken knowing. Those connections won't look like normal friendships. They'll be deeper, darker, more honest, but they'll be real. And real is what you need. You can also learn to understand yourself, to validate your own pain, to witness your own struggle. You can become the person who gets it, the person who sees you, the person who believes you. You can stop outsourcing your validation and start generating it internally. That's hard. That's lonely. That requires you to be both the wounded and the witness. But it's possible. And sometimes it's necessary, because the world doesn't owe you understanding. People don't owe you empathy. Life doesn't owe you support. But you owe yourself all those things. You owe yourself the understanding nobody else gave you, the empathy you never received, the support you always needed. You can give yourself what they couldn't. And yes, it's not the same. It's not as good as having someone else see you. But it's better than nothing. It's better than waiting forever for someone to understand who never will. So stop waiting. Stop hoping. Stop trying to make them get it. They don't. They won't. And that's okay. Because you understand. I understand. And everyone who's really lived understands. That's your tribe. Those are your people. Not the ones who were never hurt, but the ones who were hurt and survived anyway. Not the ones who stayed comfortable, but the ones who went through hell and came out changed. Not the ones who don't get it, but the ones who do. Save your pain for the people who can witness it. Save your vulnerability for the people who've earned it. And for everyone else, just smile. Nod. Say you're fine.